The Renewable Fuels Association urges the EPA to extend fuel supplies in an effort to reduce price spikes at the pump. Now, Troy Bredenkamp joins us now for further perspective. Appreciate you being with us, Troy. What exactly would you like to see from the agency, and what steps can they take?
Well, thanks for having me, Tammy. And you're right. In light of the devastation from Ida, going right through this nation's oil and gas production and refining capacity, we have sent a letter to the EPA on Monday encouraging them to allow for flexibility when it comes to fuel options and a litany of regulations that are on the retailer that could also help with this current situation.
So talk more about how this would help prevent the actual fuel price spikes.
Yeah, so we have study after study, Tammy, that shows that when you increase the supply of ethanol significantly, it helps dampen the price shocks that result from sudden oil market disruptions like a hurricane or the pipeline disruption that we saw last year. We are simply asking for them to use some common sense to allow for higher blends of ethanol to be used, even on an emergency basis, that would help alleviate some of the price spikes and supply issues that we're going to see coming out of Hurricane Ida. Two things in particular that we see very simply that the EPA could be doing. One is a temporary waiver on regulations regarding ethanol supply, including the Reed vapor pressure waiver issue. This would allow for greater use of E15 today. They've already granted that for Louisiana and Mississippi. We would ask for them to extend that across the country. The other thing that they could do, Tammy, is immediately adopt changes to the EPA's recently proposed regulations regarding underground storage tanks to allow for E15 in greater use in tanks that are now holding E10. This is something that could be done immediately to increase that fuel supply, to extend that gasoline supply. And we would urge the EPA to do these as soon as they can. I think the hurricane underscores really what we see as a larger need for flexibility and diversity in the transportation fuel sector, and that's what we're asking the EPA to do.
And of course, this would be benefiting the ethanol industry overall if it comes to pass, correct?
Well, it certainly would. We have about 200,000 barrels per day of capacity that is either offline or being used for other industrial uses. So we feel that we have some capacity that could really help in this time of need. Certainly, demand has not gotten back to pre-COVID levels, and so we have that capacity available. We're outside of the hurricane zone and certainly in a position that we could be helping if the regulations at the EPA would allow for that help to come.
Before we go, we do want to switch gears and ask you about the EPA's latest move. It's asking a court to remand small refinery exemptions that the previous administration granted in 2019. Your reaction to that?
Well, our reaction is a little bit confusion in terms of what the EPA is doing. We hope that they're trying to look at these small refinery exemptions that have already been granted. As you recall, the 10th Circuit held up two pillars that said that there was a pretty high bar that needed to be set for those exemptions to be granted. So we're hopeful that they are going to be reviewing those in light of that 10th Circuit decision and those two pillars that remain even after the Supreme Court decision to allow for the extension issue to be resolved. So we're a little bit confused on why they're doing it, but we're certainly hopeful that they're doing it for the right reason, and that is to examine those small refinery exemptions through those last two pillars.
All right, yeah, and of course we will follow up with that as well. That's Troy Bredenkamp with the Renewable Fuels Association. Appreciate your time today and input.